My mom demanded I pay for her golden son's education, though I got nothing as the adopted child. Here's what happened when I finally stood up after years of favoritism, lies, and emotional abuse. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I was 31 years old and adopted by my parents when they thought they couldn't have children. For a while, things were fine. I was adopted when I was 6, and I don't remember much from before. My mom got pregnant with my younger brother, Nick, who is now 23. I was never openly abused, but she didn't hesitate to make it clear she had a favorite child. I guess she treated me pretty well before her golden child came along. Nick was her miracle child. Yes, that's a direct quote. She called him that all the time. When I was little, I thought I understood what she meant by that. She had struggled with fertility issues all her adult life, and my parents were convinced they would never have a biological child. Over time, I realized that he was their miracle because he was their biological son, the one they really wanted. At least, that's how it seemed to me. I don't know if the fact that he was a boy also helped the favoritism. Nick had everything: new clothes, gadgets, school trips, while I almost always had to settle for hand-me-downs from my cousins. If I ever complained, I was told to suck it up and be grateful. I was usually given some excuse about how I was more independent and mature than Nick, so I didn't need the extra attention he got. I knew it was silly, but I think Nick believed it. I remember he was a pretty normal kid, and for a few years, we were close. But as I got older, the gap between us started to widen. He became spoiled, and my parents' adoration of him made it worse. That made it difficult for us to get along because my parents always took his side when something happened. It hurts me to admit it, but I started to not stand him, and we grew apart. Things really came to a head when I was saving for college. I worked part-time during high school and managed to save a good amount of money. My parents promised to match that amount for my tuition. My mom had always made it clear that they were not going to pay for my college. She insisted she had done it on her own and believed that was the right way to do it. I tried to remind her that the economy wasn't in crisis when she went to college, but they just gave me one of those speeches about how young people are so lazy now. I didn't let the subject go so easily, and they finally promised to match everything I could save. So, I worked as hard as I could, saved almost everything, and gave it my best shot at school to have a better chance of getting a good scholarship. I entered college and told my mom how much I had saved so she would know how much I needed her to match. That was when she dropped the bomb. She told me they didn't have the money at that time. I couldn't answer. I had been making my plans around that money for years. Every time I asked her, she insisted the deal was still in place. I couldn't pay for college, so my plans would have to change completely. I told her exactly that, but she didn't flinch. She simply said I was a smart girl and would find a way to manage on my own. I couldn't believe how unfair she was being. She didn't want to tell me what they had spent the money on, but clearly, it was more important than her daughter's education. She probably never had any intention of helping me at all. Here I was, counting on the one thing she had promised me. Of all the times I was forced to settle for almost nothing, this time I had been deceived. I couldn't believe I had been so naive as to trust her. Nothing I said could move her. She just sat there answering slowly, as if I was boring her. In the end, I had to hustle to make things work. I had to get a second job and take out student loans. I couldn't go to the university I had initially chosen, and it cost me a bit. But thanks to a lot of effort and some scholarships, I managed to get by. When I graduated, they didn't even bother to attend. It turned out my parents were on vacation in Europe with my brother. They knew about my graduation. I had been reminding them of the date for over a year, but it wasn't important enough to them to consider coming for me or even inviting me on a trip with them. At least the whole time I was struggling to pay my tuition, it taught me an incredible work ethic. I worked very hard while I was in college, and after I graduated. I managed to set up an internet business that, in the good months, could earn me several $1,000s just with my store. Along with my day job, I made a good amount of money. It may be immature, but I enjoyed rubbing my success in my parents' faces. You know how they say the best revenge is a successful life? I totally believe in that. It feels good. I didn't have a close relationship with my family after everything they had put me through. I moved out and rarely visited them, and they never visited me. Nick and I would talk occasionally, but I felt it was more out of obligation than anything else. I think my success made my parents start to respect me more. Sometimes they would call me if they needed my opinion on something, and it seemed like they had really started to value my point of view. I still wasn't the perfect daughter, but they weren't openly critical of me anymore. They would still take Nick on vacation without inviting me, or buy him some expensive gift while I got nothing, but at that point, I didn't care much anymore. I didn't live under their roof, and I had decided to maintain a distant relationship with them. They didn't get involved in my life, and I didn't get involved in theirs. For the most part, this arrangement worked very well for me. I can honestly say that my parents and I started to get along better after I moved out of their house. That little rule of no involvement was broken one day when my brother let slip that my parents were going through financial difficulties. My mom didn't make much, and my dad was basically never good with money. They hadn't told me, and the truth is, it didn't surprise me, given all the things I've already mentioned. My brother explained to me that they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, and that losing their house was a real risk. I realized that I was in a good position to help, but at the same time, I had no interest in doing so. Sure, I had a job and extra income, but I also had my own mortgage and things to pay. Plus, they didn't support me financially. It wasn't a high enough payment to hurt me, but I didn't feel like I had to make a sacrifice like that, no matter how small or big it was, when they didn't make any for me. My parents didn't ask me for help directly, and the conversation about it never came up between us. I know they finally resolved that problem, or at least that's what I found out, but I didn't give it much importance after learning about it. Fast forward a few months, and I received a call from my mom. There were no preambles or pretenses. She simply told me that she needed me to pay for Nick's education. I was speechless for a moment. We're not talking about a question, a suggestion, or an idea. She was directly asking, no, ordering me to do it. Nick had been taking a year for himself. He had been doing that for a few years. I always assumed he would keep putting it off indefinitely. I told her there was no way I could afford his education. I reminded her that I was left alone when it was my turn. Nick had 4 years to save up and pay for his college, but that wasn't enough for my mother, who told me on the phone to cut the stupidity and stop being so mean. She said, "It's Nick we're talking about here, and if Nick needs and wants to go to college, it would be best if, as a sister, you helped him." I was being mean? That was the last straw. I had struggled to pay for my own university, and now they were asking me to pay for the education of the golden child? And I was the one being mean for refusing? I told her that I wasn't being mean. I was just being fair. It was unfair that I had to solve everything alone, and now they wanted me to fix this too. I told her that I already had my own expenses, my savings, and responsibilities. I am not a person who can afford to pay that kind of money just like that. Most people save for years to do so, and here I was, given only a little notice that I should start paying now. I sarcastically told her it wasn't like I had a pot of gold buried in the backyard, filled with gold coins to fund the golden boy. That's not how the world works. My mom laughed sarcastically and said she knew I was annoyed because I had started earning some money. Then she brought up their mortgage and how they had made a lot of sacrifices to pay it. That, to her, meant my father had been responsible with money. She also said that paying both their mortgage and Nick's education would be impossible for them, so they needed my help. I pointed out that they had saved a good amount of money by not paying for my college, and that they could use that money for Nick. That was the moment she exploded. She was sure I was still angry, and that was why I was unwilling to help. In a way, she was partly right. I am still a little angry about the broken promise. But the truth is, I no longer hold a grudge. I've simply left it behind, although I haven't forgotten it. She said I was being selfish and that I wasn't willing to see Nick succeed. She accused me of wanting him to fail because I was too mean to be happy for someone else's success. Then she closed her speech with some very manipulative words. "At least you should do it as a thank you for adopting you." I was tired of the conversation, so I told her, I don't care what Nick does with his life, as long as it's not with my money. If he's so bright, then he can get the money himself, just like I did. And as for the adoption, I didn't choose to be adopted by you. You chose me, so don't try to use that card now. I ended the call immediately and didn't answer when she called back. I know some people will see me as the bad guy for not helping my brother, but the truth is, it's not my responsibility. They didn't give me money when it was my turn to study, but now they want me to pay for my brother. Why should I? Leaving that behind doesn't mean I now have the responsibility to give them money. I've only left it behind for my own mental health. I don't want to spend my whole life thinking about how they've hurt me, but I'm not stupid either. I'm not going to run and give them money just like that. So, that's my story with my parents. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since the phone call, and I've been forced to make some important decisions. I thought the majority of people would think I was the bad one for not rushing to help my family, but most people have been on my side in this situation. I'd even dare to say that those who attacked me were mostly trolls, as their comments contained no arguments, only insults. I suppose their reactions stem from projection, as they might be in situations similar to my brother's, expecting someone else to fund their lives. My advice to them is to focus on improving their own lives, or they'll end up suffering as my parents and brother now suffer because of their poor decisions. After talking to my mom, I ignored her for a few days. I didn't block her or anything, I just stopped responding to her calls and messages. I wanted her to understand that I didn't appreciate being treated like an ATM simply because they chose to adopt me. As expected, she crossed the boundaries I had set. One day, she came to my house, knocking loudly on my door and announcing herself in a way that was impossible to ignore. I tried, but after about 5 minutes of relentless knocking, I finally gave in. When I opened the door, she barged in without a word. Before I could react to her invasion of my space, she said, "You think you're too good to talk to your mother?" She didn't give me a chance to respond before launching into a rant about how it was my duty as a daughter to fund my brother's education. She went on about how she'd made countless sacrifices for me, and now it was my turn to make sacrifices for the family. I laughed in her face, interrupting her mid-speech. She looked at me as if I were crazy, and realizing how much it irritated her, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. I stretched out that laugh as much as I could, just to annoy her further. When I finally stopped laughing, I told her that I didn't owe her or Nick anything. I reminded her how ridiculous it was that they had made me pay for my own college education, yet now expected me to fund my brother's. I'll never forget her response. She said, "You owe everything to this family. You're lucky you got adopted, or you would have ended up with a family that treated you horribly. At least we gave you love, and this is how you repay us, by being a stranger to us." I'm not going to lie, those words pierced me like a knife. It hurt me deeply to hear them, and it still hurts to think about them. What made it worse was hearing it face to face. I had hoped that, after what she said on the phone, she might have reconsidered her stance. Maybe she'd spoken out of anger and had taken time to reflect. But no, she repeated those words, and it was clear she believed them. At the same time, her words made what I was about to do much easier. I'm still proud of myself for not reacting emotionally. I didn't let her see how much her words affected me. I told her, "I'm sorry you feel that way. If you'd rather stick with your miracle child, then the three of you can figure out Nick's tuition and your financial problems on your own. And if you think I'm ungrateful for being adopted, feel free to eliminate me from the family." I said that I didn't know if there was any way to annul the adoption, but if there was, perhaps I should look into that possibility and continue on separate paths. My mother's demeanor changed instantly, going from angry to desperate in a second, and she tried to take back her words. She said that I didn't need to be so extreme and that we could talk about this. I pointed out that she was the one who had become extreme first. What kind of mother tells her daughter she was lucky to be adopted? I asked. She began to apologize for what she had said, but it was too late. She was only apologizing because she realized there was no way she was going to get money from me. I didn't back down one bit. I repeated what she had told me, that I owed them because they adopted me. I told her that adoption was a decision they had made, and it was a poor excuse for the years of neglect and emotional abuse I had endured from them. I made it clear that I was sick of being their second choice and would rather not be an option at all. A silence followed. I hope my mom understood what I was implying, that I no longer wanted to be their backup daughter. Instead, the first thing she said was, "But if we pay for Nick's college, we won't be able to pay the mortgage or other debts we've incurred." It was at that moment, as if a switch had flipped, that I realized something. I had always thought I was the second option, but the truth was I wasn't even that. They just needed me for the money, and after that, they wouldn't care much. To them, I was like a moneylender, except I wasn't going to send anyone to break their legs if they didn't pay me back. Not that it mattered. They weren't planning to pay me back anyway. They were there to get free money from me, because if that weren't the case, they wouldn't even be at my house. Imagine if I told them I'd help only if they promised to return the money with interest. They wouldn't be at my house at all. They'd be at the bank or with a loan shark. I realized I was just a stranger to them with the added bonus that they could play the family card to guilt me into giving them money. I felt stupid for only realizing it at that moment. I'm sure, for anyone reading this, it was obvious from the beginning, but it's easy to fool yourself when you're personally involved. I had been optimistic, hoping they were slowly changing. But they were only tolerating me long enough to get what they wanted. That realization was the final straw for me. I didn't answer her question. I didn't give her any clever responses. I just told her to get out of my house and to never come back. She said I was being impulsive and begged me not to make hasty decisions I'd regret later. I told her this was something I should have done years ago. I'd spent my life hoping that one day I'd be as important to them as Nick, or that they'd at least give me some basic respect. Now, I saw that was never going to happen, and I didn't want anything to do with them ever again. My mom didn't leave immediately. She started yelling at me, but all it took was me reaching for one of the lamps nearby for her to finally agree to leave. The whole time, she begged me to reconsider. She even said she'd get Nick to talk to me, but I didn't care. Call me vindictive if you want, but the entire situation really got on my nerves. Not only had I been lied to, but I had been treated as if they had the right to treat me this way. I started brainstorming ways to get back at them, and the winning idea was to agree to pay their mortgage, as long as they paid for Nick's tuition. It was a matter of principle. I didn't think it was right to pay for my brother's education when no one paid for mine. After my mom sent me a few more conciliatory messages, I proposed a meeting to tell her my idea. The only problem for them was that I wasn't actually planning to pay their mortgage. They didn't know that, though. They've started making tuition payments, buying study materials, and other such things. I don't know if they're using money they already had or if they've taken out loans, but from experience, I know it hasn't been cheap. The interesting part will be when they find out I'm not paying their mortgage next month. I'll let you know how it goes in my next update. For now, it's just a matter of waiting. Update 2. I am very surprised that people like stories where others get even, especially with entitled people like my parents. I assumed I would receive the most hate, but instead, many have said that my parents deserved it. I've even read comments saying that what I did was quite minimal. As for the update and my parents' reaction, the day they found out must have been very chaotic for them. I don't know exactly why, but they were blocked and my family couldn't contact me. However, they appeared at my house a couple more times. I never opened the door for them, and eventually, they would leave when they got tired of knocking. They finally realized that showing up at my house wasn't going to solve anything. That's when they decided to confront me at work. This time, my dad and my brother came without my mom. They practically jumped toward me as I walked to my car. For a moment, I was in shock, but I ignored them and sped up my pace. Nick ran in front of me and blocked my path. My dad told me that their bank hadn't received the mortgage payment and that they were in trouble because they were already a bit behind. The risk of the bank taking their house was suffocating them. He asked me if everything was okay and when I was going to send the check. That was probably the moment for me to tell them the truth, that there wasn't going to be any check for their specific bank. I told them outright that there would be no check. I added that I didn't have the money at that time. It was almost the same excuse my mother had once given me, though she wasn't there to hear it herself. I know I've said before that I didn't hold a grudge, but after everything they've done, it's easy for all of those feelings to resurface. I turned to Nick and told him that I hoped he could figure out his education just like I had, but that I wouldn't be in contact with him anymore. Staying in touch with him would only give my parents another way to reach me. I tried to walk away again, but my dad grabbed my arm and said I had to figure this out right now. Something about the strength with which he held me scared me. I told him I would scream if he didn't let go, and I truly meant it. When I tried to pull away again, he tightened his grip. That's when I reached for the pepper spray in my bag. I always carry it with me for risky situations, and this felt like one of those moments. I pressed down hard, and a good amount of spray hit my dad directly in the eyes. Nick tried to get closer, but he got grazed by the spray as well. It didn't hit him fully, but it was enough to make him back off. I took advantage of the moment, got into my car, and drove away. If they try anything further, I know there are cameras at work that I can use as evidence. Given this aggression, I suppose it wouldn't be difficult to request a restraining order. There's always the option of leaving the city, getting another job, and putting distance between myself and my parents. But I don't want to let them win. I don't want them to think they have power over me, forcing me to leave because of them. I don't want to abandon my job and my friends just because of their actions. I know what I've done might not make them stop completely, but at least they now know that if they mess with me, there will be consequences. Update 3. It's time to tell you what's been going on in my life lately. As you can imagine, my story was far from over. After everything that's happened, at least I can say that my parents have left me alone. They have not tried to contact me, much less confront me at my job. In the end, the pepper spray was worth every penny I paid for it. I would keep a whole box in my house right now, but I think it loses its effectiveness over time. For now, I've only replaced the one I used on my father. As for whether they might try to sue me for offering to pay their mortgage, that's unlikely. It's always better to discuss such matters in person, where there's no trace of what's said. Before you wonder if my parents could use this post as evidence, I've changed many details. For example, the pepper spray, it wasn't exactly what I used. I won't leave traces for my parents to use against me. If they had found this post, they could have saved themselves the time and money of hiring a lawyer. I would have helped them pay the mortgage, but my parents are very special people. Not only have they become homeless, but my brother has also been unable to attend university. When you stop paying tuition, these things usually happen. I don't consider this to be my fault. My brother could have taken a job and paid for his studies. Instead, he simply expected my parents to cover everything, which might be easier, but is not the only way. As for my parents and their mortgage, they could have paid it with their own money. Instead, they spend it all giving my brother an easy and spoiled life, always expecting their adopted daughter to handle it. I don't think they adopted me for that reason, but something certainly changed when they had my brother. They started seeing me differently. Now, regarding the consequences of not paying the mortgage, my parents have lost their house. But as I said, that has worked out better for me because they have decided to move. Instead of me having to leave, they're the ones who have moved, and it couldn't have turned out better for me. I'm not going to say that I've been the good one here, not at all. But for those who say I'm the bad one just because I got revenge on my parents and should have simply broken ties with them, I ask, what did they expect? My parents would never have left me alone. Sometimes it's necessary to hit back, like what happened at my job, so they learn not to mess with you. On the internet, there's always a mix of opinions. Most of the negative comments probably come from people who hate it when others stand up for themselves. These are the kind of people who preach forgiveness when others finally get tired of their nonsense and put them in their place. To wrap up this update and move on, I can tell you that I am in the process of changing my last name. This way, I will have no relationship with my parents or my brother, neither by blood nor legally. In a sense, I've simply divorced them, which gives me incredible peace of mind. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories.